these videos are usually called recaps and reflections, and they have been particularly light on recap throughout this entire series. So, before we get dragged off by the reflections bus, let's recap. This was today, session 9. But how did we get to session 9? Through session 8. How did we get through session 8? Through session 7. So, in sessions 1 to 3, we meet Tess, an artificial human, and we meet Cadmus, a wealthy and well-placed member of an upper stratum of society who works down among the lowest stratum of society in security for a company called Watchful Eye. And questions are raised about both of these characters in terms of identity. Right? Why is this guy working down here? Why is this, high-end, impossibly well-designed artificial being stripped of memory, stripped of clothing even, and left to her own devices to make her way in the real world? We also meet a third character who will play a more important role later on, of Yorn, a street preacher for a religious movement called the Church of the Unified. All right, so these are our main characters, and they're set in a place called the Appalachian Heights, which is a megalopolis stretching from Montreal to New York. And it's winter. And it will be winter for the entirety of the entire story. The entirety of the entire story. And that period of time is 3 weeks. We play through 1 week in pretty much extreme detail, and then we play one more day 2 weeks later. That's really how everything plays out. The street preacher is an archetype or a playbook known as the Seeker. And this playbook is built around the idea of communion, of living a life of faith, and the benefits that come from that in a cyberpunk context. The apparatus is primarily built around the themes of humanity. How aware is this construct, this apparatus, of how different it may or may not be from the rest of humanity? One of the most interesting things which happened in the first 3 sessions was simply the large number of people who automatically knew that the apparatus was an apparatus, although the apparatus was built from the point of view, or the perspective of the apparatus was that she would be hidden. Right? So her programming, let's say, had biased her toward the idea that she would be able to pass as human. No one would really know. But most of the people that she was meeting and interacting with on a fundamental or deeper or more personal level were able to see through the guys. I mean, literally, in the case of Yorn and Cadmus, able to literally see that she's not human because of the types of cyber implants that they have. Planting the seed of doubt. Who else knows? How obvious is it? What does this mean? Cadmus is a character type or a playbook called the Dying, and so is on a clock. And there are a variety of ways to set that up, but we tied ours to the session that we were in as he's rapidly progressing toward this disease. And the first MC, Jean-Francois, tied this also to a date. You've got a week to live. So meaning the first 6 sessions needed to take place inside a week, which is kind of interesting. So those are our 3 characters: the Seeker, the Apparatus, and the dying. As we've commented many times going through, these are archetypes that you could imagine being the sole protagonist in their own story, and yet now are part of some kind of relationship. What is that relationship going to be as we transition from the first 3 sessions into the next sessions? That issue of relationship comes to the front, and it's tied, intimately and intricately with the ideas of responsibility and its flip side of freedom, but mostly, most strongly, most obviously, with the idea of identity. And these themes, at least to my eyes, you can't separate them. Who am I? What can I do? What must I do? These are all questions that are linked and synced together. So as the first 3 sessions come to a close, as we recognize where we are, what the realities of the situation are, how harsh life is on the ground level, as we plant all these questions, Tess asking, why am I here? Cadmus asking, who has done this to me? Right? Both of them asking, can I make something different of my life? And in the background, their new friend whispering, join the church, become one with the whole. All will be answered. In the 4th, 5th, and 6th sessions, run by Ivan, Cadmus' desperation begins to overcome everything. Right? I need to know, I need to act, and he begins to penetrate, with the help of Yorn, the right layers of society that he needs to get the answers of how his condition was thrust upon him, why someone like Tess exists, why others like Tess are running around the city and perpetrating extreme acts of violence, and why should he, who is already dying, also be targeted for this type of violence. Interesting stuff, all of which pushes Cadmus to have to dig deeper into the weird and definitely inhuman abilities that his disease causes in him. So we see the character who is most concerned with clinging to life have to burn out ever faster, have to embrace the inhuman disease, which is, from his point of view, stripping his freedom, stripping his identity away from him. And as we reach the end of session 6, we have Tess wrestling very strongly with, am I a machine? Can I be human? Can I be free? Can I overcome these elements of hardened programming inside me to do what I want to do? Do I even know what I want to do? We have Cadmus repeatedly saying, I'm dying, and I don't want to. I object, I resist, I oppose. And if I'm going down, then I'm pulling the whole system that brought me down with me. Other people deserve the right to be free of this. And this brings about an incredible moment of self-sacrifice from Yorn, willing to trade places with Cadmus. And when Cadmus rejects this offer, the two part ways, never expecting to see one another again. And Cadmus goes off to strike his blow, not even knowing what that blow exactly will be. And in so doing, tears down a small part of human organization, which has been shaping, but also preying upon the power of the veil. So as I look forward to session 7, 8, and 9, I have to ask myself, if that conglomeration of power, if that organization has been torn down in the way in which it was torn down, then that creates this vacuum. And who's in a position to take over that space? Who is there to say, this is mine? Or is no one there to say this is mine? And what would happen if that weight around the neck of the veil were lifted? For the last 3 sessions, it was even more important to bring the final question out into the light and to bring more of the nature of the campaign at that point to light, which had been a very introspective one talking about life itself, one talking about choice, one talking about responsibility and opportunity, one talking about who we really are and if that is immutable or mutable. So I needed to ask questions, and this put me in a position where I could embrace the idea of a lot of why I like to play, just asking questions, not necessarily needing to answer them, having my own kind of proto-answers in mind. But so Cadmus has died. We have this theme of power underlying everything. We are inherently powerless. All the characters feel like they've been striking or trying to strike blows against this monolithic enemy and nothing matters. And so we must begin session 7 with change, and so we do. Yorn receives a notification that he is the beneficiary of Cadmus's apartment high up on level 4. Tess wonders, why not me? I was a much closer friend, wasn't I? And once again, Tess has to come face to face with the idea of, as human as I become, I am still an artificial human. I perhaps cannot inherit. I am something that might be inherited. And Yorn and Tess begin to explore life on other levels, how different it is, how far away from the stink and the muck and the mindless consumerism of the lower levels to a more rarefied, isolated lifestyle where they discover over my 3 sessions that the same bad habits that exist on the ground exist in the sky. They're just cleaner. So they explore their new environment. They discover that Cadmus is being investigated. They discover that all of the trouble that was caused by rioting, all of the trouble that was caused by what Cadmus was trying to do, all the trouble that was caused by what other unhappy agencies on the bottom of society were trying to do, it has all been swept aside. It's all been put down as, where were you during the storm? And that sort of thing. It's as if nothing ever happened. But then the street reasserts itself. It intrudes itself into their lives. There's a knock at the door. It's Cadmus's brother and Cadmus's mother, and they are demanding that, something is wrong. There's no way that some stranger, some street preacher would be living in the house that was meant for them. How could you possibly have inherited? And they want to evict Yorn and Tess. This creates more social dynamic struggles. Tess is still trying to figure out, what am I? Am I an assassin? Am I a prostitute? Am I a person? Am I a machine? And there's just all this confusion. She doesn't know what's happening with Yorn. She doesn't understand what's happening with these two people who claim to be relatives of Cadmus and yet are so not like him, and this new environment and all of its emptiness. And then the inevitable happens. Arguments. And through it all, the veil is still present. The veil is still listening. The veil is still speaking. The veil is still waiting. The veil is still watching. The veil is omnipresent. Is it omniscient as well? Yorn and Tess argue and separate. And Tess comes face to face with the realization of where she came from and why she was made. And then is tasked with doing something about it. She is given no orders. She is given no real guidance, just questions and her own conclusions. Meanwhile, Yorn is presented with his dream. And he's unwilling to accept that it might be real. And Yorn is likewise faced with observation, faced with questions, and faced with choices. And both Tess and Yorn, finally at the end of episode 9, once again come together to maybe try to answer those questions. So, that's our story inside the veil. One constantly asking questions about humanity, life, freedom, responsibility. One constantly engaged or wrapped in this theme of power, powerlessness, effectiveness, ineffectiveness. The sense of, do I shape my life, or does my life shape me? And am I simply a pawn of those with more power and better position? Can I pull them down? Can they pull me up? I think this has been the kind of mainly conversation-based, mainly role-play-based, mainly emotional interaction that only a game like The Veil can set you up to play as a regular thing. Every part about the text as you go through is putting you in mind of asking questions, of exploring themes, about describing situations, but then bringing those to a question. And of course, the game itself is full of insight into cyberpunk fiction, cyberpunk film, and cyberpunk ideas, and asking you to work together with the group to mix those together into the right blend of particular items and aspects that will enable you to explore specific ideas and ask certain questions. So in terms of its contribution to the experience, The Veil, I think, did an excellent job, and it's one that I'd like to explore in a different cyberpunk Powered by the Apocalypse game, either Headspace or possibly The Sprawl, to feel the difference about how the author's voice in the text influences you as you sit down to be an MC or to run a playbook. As I sit here today, having finished the 9th session a couple hours ago, I am pretty satisfied with the fiction aspect that was created through our play. I'm disappointed that we couldn't play the sessions closer together so that we could have developed a greater facility with playing the system. So every session felt like session 2, where you know what's out there in the system, you know how everything works, but it's not a habit, it's not intuitive, it's, do I want to do this or do I want to do that? Which one is better? There's an awful lot of decision making. So it felt, for each session of the 9 sessions, it felt like we were learning to play the game. We felt like if we were sitting around the table, the books would be there, the books would be open, the playbooks would be open, and play would be stopping regularly to make sure we're doing it right. So I had really hoped that that would not be the case, but it was the case, and it needed to be recognized, it needed to be accepted, which was not easy, really, considering that we were openly sharing our learning experience over these 9 sessions in video form, right? To see the play of this Powered by the Apocalypse game not get any better over the 9 sessions is, it's frustrating. We can understand why when you look at the great amount of time between each and every session, but it doesn't make it any more pleasant a reality to accept. But there it is. But it was nice to see each game master go through a sort of a personal arc with running a new game, and you get to see it play out again and again. You can see the pattern to it, the leap of faith. We're going to try this new game, it's going to be fun. And so the experience of learning the new game is positive. And then in the second session, there are things that pop up which are frustrating. My instincts are telling me to do this, or habitually I would do that, or I think what I remember about the rules are saying to do this, but now I'm in this particular situation that's emerged from all the interaction of all the information, and whatever it is that I want to do now doesn't feel right. Is that just a feeling? Is that because I'm doing something wrong? I don't know, but we're playing live, and I have to make a decision right now. You can see that process play out for each of us, and I think that's useful and interesting all by itself. Now, we all found different things in the system that were challenging, and we all found some similar things that were challenging, and so being able to discuss them was very, very useful. Having the third character be mainly absent during each of the 3 sessions was also useful. This allowed us to really see who the characters are, what the playbooks were about, and to give people the opportunity, if they would take it, to go out into the world and try and do something. So all of those things combined together to give us a steady movement through the theme. It certainly didn't follow a standard story structure. It certainly didn't follow the idea of things gradually getting worse, building to a climax and leading to a resolution. It certainly didn't go through 3 acts. It certainly didn't follow find a number of clues or collect the right information and assemble them together into a completed puzzle and go, aha! It did none of those things. What did it do? It explored character. And through that exploration of character, huge, timeless, important questions were discussed from very different points of view at very different points in the story through different characters' perspectives and lenses. Asking questions, offering answers, rebutting answers, refuting the rebuttals, reasserting beliefs, challenging beliefs. It was very satisfying play. I'm glad we did it. Looking back and seeing what the actual fiction, seeing what the actual story product of play was, I really wish we had done the play part better, or at least more smoothly, or closer together in time. And yet I also have to recognize the fact that the outcome we got happened as a result of exactly what we put into it. And perhaps if we had played more regularly and gained greater facility with the system, we would have come out with a story that I would personally be much less satisfied with. We could describe how it ends as an anticlimax. We could describe how it ends as, well, as an intentional turning away from what might normally be a climax in a film. But at the same time, this is exactly the kind of film that I love watching. It's exactly the kind of story that I enjoy reading. The one that has built me up, pointed me at a precipice of question and answer, and then said, the end. So it bears the stamp of those who played it, for sure. And I hope, if people watch it, that they get some enjoyment out of the questions that are raised, the way the themes are portrayed, the cyberpunk universe that we tried to display, and the characterization of the personalities within our version of the Veil. And I guess for one last comment, the group we set up on Facebook to talk about running the game, talk about schedules and things, we ended up calling it The Veil, Cold is the New Warmth. And that became the de facto title of the campaign. Cold is the New Warmth. And I was very pleased to realize once I was sitting down, turning off the session, right, that title mattered in different ways all the way through, particularly at the beginning and at the end. It was the place we started, the theme we wanted to discuss, just on a very physical level. Ice, cold, harsh electric lights, life on the street, right? Cold is the new warmth. And what we passed through, what types of coldness, alienation, isolation, question, and death we passed through in the middle to wind up at the ending and have it still matter on a different level. I think that that kind of thing, that kind of synchronicity, that kind of emergent, not story, but that emergent metaphor happens when a group syncs and really tries to respect what everybody else in the group is trying to contribute. So I will look back on this with a lot of fondness, and as the distance between the playing and the remembering grows, it will become fonder and fonder as I as I forget about the fumbling and just remember the fiction. I'll be glad, and more glad, and even gladder that we did it, and that I had this opportunity to be a part of this group. So for those of you who have come along with us, thanks. For those of you who have left comments, who have left useful bits of advice about your personal experience with Powered by the Apocalypse or with the Veil, we really appreciated you taking the time to share your thoughts with us. And if in the future people stumble across this once it's long over and gain some benefit from your comments or from our explorations, I think that will be great too. And if anyone has thoughts about what they think about the relationships between these characters, about their particular answers to the questions that were raised, about what future possibility these characters might have in the world that they have at the end of Session 9 just created, we'd like to hear about them. Anyway, take care.